Revelation chapter 13, verse 10. As I read in my last video, he that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Okay, and how was we killed with the sword? Okay, we were brutally killed with the sword, especially during the time of slavery. Okay, and even before then, from the time of the Greeks, when Alexander the Greek came into power, to the time he died and his four generals claimed rule, throughout the land, from their era to the Roman Empire, to the downfall of the Roman Empire, to the Renaissance period, which took place around the 1600s. Well, the Renaissance period, which really took place around the 1500s, all the way up until now, we have been brutally killed with the sword. Now, a sword is just an instrument of death, okay? Even fire can be a sword, because you can kill somebody by burning them to death. But the point is that during the time of slavery, a lot of vicious acts were carried out against us. And I'm gonna just name some. Like during the time when Gad, who are the so-called native Indians, when they ruled this land, and the conquistadors and Spaniards came over here, they came over here under the guise of peace. But as time passed on, what were these, and by the way, these English, Dutch mercenaries and Spaniards, they were all Edomites, okay? They were Edomites. And, they started killing our people with smallpox. They started killing our people with tuberculosis, scarlatina, typhoid, typhus, chickenpox, smallpox. They plagued our people with all manner of diseases. They had so-called native Indians, the Taino Indians, which are the Puerto Ricans, the so-called Mexicans. They had them running through the forest, butt naked, shooting them down, while they were desperately running for their life, them and their kids. While these conquistadors and Spaniards were on horseback, chasing our people down, and shooting them in their back, man, putting them to death. So because the blood of our people has been shed, the blood of you so-called white people, as well as you other nations, your blood has to be shed as well. And the Lord is going to use his people to shed your blood. Okay, it says, here is the patience and the faith of the saints. Okay, here's the patience and faith of the saints, because we are patiently waiting, for Yahushua to return, so we can be liberated from this kingdom and receive power to get our vengeance. So in the kingdom of heaven, we're going to be slaughtering you so-called white people as well as you heathens. Okay? And it's not going to be pretty either, man. It's going to be beyond terrifying as to what's going to happen to you heathens as well as you so-called white people in the kingdom of heaven. This is the book of Isaiah, chapter 47, verse 6. I was wroth with my people. Why was Yahweh Bashem, Yahweh Shai wroth with us? Because we turned our backs on him and we broke the Lord's law, statutes, and commandments and refused to keep them. We were not keeping his high holy days. We weren't keeping his Sabbaths. As a nation of people, we were going off worshiping other gods, man. And not only that, but also what happened to the Lord's Son 2,000 years ago. Our people was responsible for Yahweh Shai being murdered 2,000 years ago. So Yahweh Bashem, Yahweh Shai was very wroth with us. I have polluted mine inheritance and given them into thine hand. Thou didst shew them no mercy. Okay? And this is where I really wanted to start getting into, the heinous acts, what happened to us during the time of slavery. Because these so-called white people, they showed us no mercy. They had so-called blacks, Jamaicans, and Haitians, and even some Gadites out there in the slave fields, working on empty stomachs. And in some cases, these so-called white people, they would have our people working out there in a hot, blazing slave field, picking tobacco, carrying heavy baskets of tobacco and cotton and fruits and vegetables for days and hours with no food or water. And what happened? Eventually, our people would collapse. They were unable to work because they was too weak. They was too weak because they had no food in their belly. And you know what the slave master would do? He would go out there with a whip and he would start whipping the ones who collapsed on the ground, demanding them to get back up and work. So this devil had no mercy upon us. Okay, the slaves who attempted to run away from plantations, as soon as the slaves were caught, you know what happened? They would take the slaves, they would chop off their ankles, they would chop off either their left or right ankle so they couldn't run away no more. Okay? They took our 4-year-old, our 5-year-old, our 7-year-old, our 8, 9, and 10-year-old children, and they had sex with them, rather if they were male or females. They was having sex with our little kids, raping them against their will. Okay? And then they was doing something called bucket breaking, where they would rape the male slaves in front of the other slaves so that the slaves would not rebel. Okay? They raped our women. And not to mention, there was something called alligator boo, which was all about using an Israelite baby as alligator bait by taking the Israelite baby, tying it with a rope, and then leaving it out leaving that baby out in a swamp somewhere while the baby cried helplessly for his or her parents, so that while you were out there in the slave fields working, sweating, blood, sweat, and tears, while you was hearing your baby cried helplessly for your help while you were out there working, suddenly you didn't hear that baby cry no more. You know why? Because that baby just got eaten by an alligator. And that alligator was soon caught, and so-called white people would use those alligators to make leather shoes, leather jackets, leather out of chairs, couches, you name it. Okay? If you had a wife, they took your wife away from you and they raped her. In some cases, they'd even rape your wife right in front of you. And then they'll laugh and smile right in your face. Okay? There were other cases where they would make sharpened stakes out of wood, and they would put them inside of a deep pit. And you know what they would do? They would take either an Israelite man or woman and throw them inside the pit and watch them get impaled by those stakes until they bled to death.